Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 30 of the Holistic Living Podcast. Today we are talking about pneumonia. I went back and forth on whether I wanted to talk about pneumonia or bronchitis, and I figured, you know what? More people have messaged me lately on remedies and support for pneumonia, so I thought that might be more appropriate for this time. So I hope you benefit. I hope that you also learn something, and if you ever have any questions on any of my podcast topics, you can always reach me through my social media, specifically Instagram, as I check that the most often. It's Holistic Homeopath with a W. All right, so let's get into it. Most of you know that pneumonia is an infection of the lung alveoli. It's characterized by consolidation due to an outpouring of fluids into that alveolar space. So the fluid will accumulate and it prevents the exchange of gases as a result. So it obviously makes breathing more difficult. Pneumonia can be classified anatomically as lobar, which is like in the alveoli of a lobe, or bronchopneumonia, which is more in the terminal bronchioles. So there's two kind of classifications there. So let's get into a little bit of the etiology of it. Some causative agents of acute bronchopneumonia are from some pathogens such as Streptococcus pneumoniae, there's Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pyogenes, Klebsiella pneumoniae, and Haemophilus influenzae. Staph aureus will rarely cause primary pneumonia, but can become superimposed on another condition in immunocompromised individuals and can cause a lot of destruction to the body. So in regards to Klebsiella pneumonia, it's more uncommon and occurs typically in alcoholics, diabetics, or conditions of chronic oral sepsis. And there's typically a mortality rate of about 40%. So bronchopneumonia typically occurs in infants, the elderly, and in immunocompromised individuals. Viral infections, chronic bronchitis, and cystic fibrosis can progress to become bronchopneumonia. It can occur in patients with cancer, stroke, or congestive cardiac failure, and after surgery as well. So let's get into signs and symptoms, and then we'll get into all the different recommendations and things like that. So some signs and symptoms, specifically when we're looking at the clinical features of pneumococcal lobar pneumonia, it's a sudden onset of a fever, shaking, chills, and then a sharp pleural pain on inspiration. Breathing is typically shallow and rapid, and there's a cough productive of blood-stained sputum. Now, when you have the Streptococcus pneumoniae, it can also cause meningitis and ear infections. So keep that in mind. You have, those symptoms I just mentioned, and then if it's coming from the strain Strep pneumoniae, it can also potentially cause meningitis, which is inflammation of the meninges, and ear infection. The major symptoms of acute bronchopneumonia are abrupt onset of high fever, shaking, chills, and cough, productive of mucopurulent sputum, occasionally accompanied by hematosis. Now, there are focal opacities that are evident typically on a radiological exam as well. So I know this is a lot of technical vocabulary, but what you need to know is typically you will start to see if you're having more of the lobar pneumonia, you're going to start to see sudden onset of fever, which is quite similar to bronchopneumonia. You're going to have the shaking, you're going to have the chills, so similar for both cases. You're going to have a cough. With the lobar pneumonia, you might see some of the blood-stained mucus. With the bronchopneumonia, you're going to see that mucopurulent sputum. So in regards to the pathophysiology, when we're talking about the pneumococcal lobar pneumonia, and you have that strain Streptococcus pneumoniae, it can cause acute congestion of the alveoli, which is a little air sacs in your lungs. And this is because the macrophages of the immune system can't get a hold on that polysaccharide capsule, that sugar capsule of that strain of pathogen. So it can't ingest them to initiate an immune response. Typically, when there's something in our body, some kind of pathogen that doesn't belong, our body will release macrophages that kind of go in and literally ingest or eat that pathogen and then destroy it. This will initiate an immune response, and the immune system comes in, inflammation gets elevated, and then the process starts from there. Specifically, that polysaccharide capsule that is surrounding that Streptococcus pneumoniae strain, it makes it hard for the macrophages to ingest and then initiate that immune response. So the alveoli, those sacs in the lungs, become filled with mucus, and then neutrophils, many bacteria, and red blood cells will also be there. And they're usually lysed or ruptured by the bacteria. This is followed by a phase called red hepatization, and it lasts up to 4 days. In this phase, the lung tissue is dry, firm, red, and granular from all of the mucus, the neutrophils, the bacteria, the red blood cells. Then that drier phase comes in. The exudate in the alveoli contains a network of fibrin threads. For another 4 days, there is a phase called gray hepatization, in which the alveoli are distended and filled with dense fibrin, neutrophils, and disintegrating red blood cells. And at this stage, antibodies to the Streptococcus pneumoniae are present in the blood, and then the fever typically will subside. So the body has initiated this antibody production, which has then allowed the body to take hold of that specific strain, and then the fever can come down. Resolution will then start with enzymal breakdown of the alveoli, and it'll complete resolution and re-aeration of the tissues in the lungs will take place about 3 weeks. It'll take about 3 weeks for that to happen. Now, the tissue is not permanently damaged, and it will return to normal. Occasionally, there can be complications that set in, like the alveolar exudates becoming organized into it almost like goes through fibrosis, so it hardens and it gets organized into an airless, leathery kind of tissue, or what they call pleural effusion, which is fluid in the pleural cavity, or a lung abscess can also occur. But that's not as common. Typically, you go through all of these stages, and then there is that full resolution, and your lung tissue does return back to normal, thanks to the incredible healing capacities of our body. So in terms of acute bronchopneumonia, you're going to have some different pathophysiology. So unlike pneumococcal lobar pneumonia, the inflammation occurs mainly in the air passages. And then there is bronchial inflammation, which extends into the surrounding sacs of the lungs, which are the alveoli. This will result in numerous foci of consolidation, and usually there's a damage and destruction to the bronchioles with foci of permanent fibrosis. Now, if you guys don't know, fibrosis is hardening of a tissue. So this can lead to the development of bronchiectasis, a condition in which the non-compliance of the lung tissue causes bronchioles to become permanently distended. So this, in like the lobar pneumonia, which returns back to normal typically after you go through those couple weeks or several weeks, the bronchopneumonia usually results in permanent fibrosis of the bronchioles. So they become permanently distended. So there are some different things to look at. Now, before we get into recommendations for pneumonia, which I will definitely go through diet, supplements, some lifestyle factors, I do want to stress here that first and foremost, pathogenic strains are typically what can create, they come into the body and then they can create these symptoms that we're experiencing through pneumonia. And then there are conditions that we have that make us more likely to develop pneumonia. Like we mentioned earlier, alcoholics, diabetics, if you're smoking, things like that. So what we want to be doing, I would say first and foremost, before just thinking about what can I do with my diet, what can I take supplements, really understand that if you have gone through periods where you were drinking a lot, where you were smoking a lot, where you ate a lot of sugar, maybe you're pre-diabetic, maybe you're fully diabetic, maybe you just have really high stress levels. It is so important to just reassess our life, what's happened in our past, and make sure we have put in the work to support and rebuild back our immune system. Because if we want to have any success at fighting, these infections and this inflammation, we need a strong, robust immune system. And so what we should be doing is practicing things daily outside of just diet and supplements. We should be doing things daily that are going to keep our immune system very strong, very healthy. If you have not done a solid liver, kidney, and lung detox, which is our 3 primary emunctories or elimination or detox pathways of our body, you should work with a practitioner to help you get onto a protocol that can do liver, kidney, and lung drainage. Clean those organs out. Make sure that they're, first of all, ready to go, have no toxicity or damage that can elicit more inflammation. We also should be doing protocols seasonally to keep our pathogens low, like candida, like yeast, fungus, parasites, bacteria, and viruses. And we should be doing daily and also seasonal support to keep a strong, robust immune system. These are not things we needed to do far in the past when our food supply was not toxic, when there was no pollution in our air, when we were not doing this 9-to-5 rat race, when we, were not eating copious amounts of sugar and drinking alcohol and all these things. But in our modern world, these are all things that are very much part of majority of people's lives. And so we need to do more maintenance than we maybe would have needed to do in the past. It's important to put in that work because at the end of the day, you can take all the supplements you want when you get pneumonia, but once you have it, it's too late to try to reverse all those issues that you've had before. You now have the condition. If you want to try and prevent or have the best chance of the least damage with the condition, you need to put the work in beforehand. So I just wanted to put that in there. Just have that in your mind. So it's something that you're thinking about when you're like, what can I do to protect my lungs, to support my body, especially if you're someone who gets recurring pneumonia, it's so important for you to just really say like, let's do some good lung drainage. Let's do good support for the liver, the kidneys, the immune system, keep pathogen burden low, etc. All right, so let's get into the recommendations. I'll start with diet. This is always more important than even taking supplements because you can, again, take all the supplements in the world, but if your diet's not great, you're going to have that continual inflammation. So we want to eliminate mucus-forming foods. This is obviously while you have pneumonia, but also to prevent. And if you have recurring pneumonia, this is something you should do all the time. Mucus-forming foods are dairy products, bananas, oranges. You have sugars, a lot of fat, anything super cold, anything that can cause that cold or dampness in the body should be avoided. You can find a full list on Google of the foods to avoid that produce mucus. You also want to avoid foods that you are personally sensitive to. If you know that every time you eat chickpeas, you react, or every time you have gluten, you feel horrible for a few days, you should be minimizing or avoiding them completely because anything we eat that we're sensitive to elicits an immune response. And anytime our body has to elicit that immune response, it weakens our immune system because our immune system gets more fatigued. So if we're eating foods we're sensitive to every single day, our immune system is working nonstop every single day, and it will become fatigued and then have a harder time fighting against infections and pathogens. So we want to be really careful with protecting our immune system by minimizing foods we're sensitive to keep our inflammation lower. You also want to avoid or minimize coffee, caffeine, stimulants, and even carbonated beverages, which all weaken immune system. They stress the kidneys. They are very acidic, so make our body more inflamed over time. They deplete a lot of nutrition from our system and much more. And then we want to avoid sugar and alcohol and any artificial sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose and those kinds of things as well. If you want something sweet, you should either, have a natural sugar like coconut, maple syrup, honey, dates, and even with that, really minimize it. Maybe try some like liquid stevia, which might be a better option because it's sugar-free and actually has antiviral properties. You want to drink a lot of water. This is so important to stay hydrated for not just your body in general, but keeping our cells hydrated is crucial. And then, of course, you want to be eating, lots of complete proteins and having lots of dark leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables, especially. They contain different sulfur compounds, which actually help support and reduce inflammation and rebuild our lungs. So having that sulfur support is really important. If a fever is present, so if you have pneumonia or not, if you just have a fever, you only want clear fluids. You don't want to be forcing full meals down for yourself, for your child, just clear fluids so the body does not have to work on digesting, because that actually can drop the fever and can cause an incomplete clearance of the virus. So just clear fluids if a fever is present. Now, in terms of supplements, first and foremost, probiotics. Whether or not you have pneumonia or get pneumonia, this is something that majority of people should really be doing to support and protect their gut health. Any chronic stress that we take, any medications, any antibiotics, any inflammatory foods, sugars, poor sleep, anything like that really weakens our gut population. So it's something we should all be doing in today's world. Vitamin C is obviously like number one. Typically, it helps to boost our immune system, can really help fight against pathogens. And then we want to do antioxidants like vitamins E, A, and zinc. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically that EPA DHA, is essential as well. And then we can do natural anti-inflammatories. So things like curcumin can be really beneficial. It reduces inflammation. You have your quercetin and rutin. These are great as well to help lower inflammation. So there's so many options, slippery elm, marshmallow root, that all are working towards reducing whole body inflammation. So you can kind of find something that works for you. Check with your doctor first. Even things like boswellia is amazing. And then you want to look into proteolytic enzymes as well to really help break down, again, that histamine and that inflammation. I really like the brand Wobenzyme. They're amazing, but there's so many options out there. So check with your practitioner or doctor before ever supplementing, and they can also then give you some recommendations. Now, you want to do some antimicrobials. I absolutely love clove, olive leaf, black walnut, and oregano. Those are like 4 really great ones. You can do one or a combination of the 4 to help bring down any pathogenic populations. Now, I apologize ahead of time, or not even ahead of time. If you have heard my baby screaming in the background, I apologize. It's not professional at all, but he's here, and this is the only time I had to do the podcast recording. So unfortunately, you might hear some screeches in the background. I do apologize. But to continue on with supplements, it's a real world here, guys. We're going to do and recommend N-acetylcysteine. This is a sulfur compound. So coming back to what I mentioned earlier, sulfur is not just antiviral, specifically NAC. It's antiviral, but it's also mucolytic. So anytime you have congestion or mucus, right away bring in NAC and or glutathione. Check with your doctor first, but those are like the 2 that can help expel and break down and excrete mucus, reduce that congestion, which is so important, especially with pneumonia. But they're also antiviral. They also help the lungs repair, and they help the liver repair. So there's so many benefits. So again, N-acetylcysteine and glutathione are 2 important supplements. Anytime we're dealing with lung issues, I also always have to recommend a magnesium, not a citrate. That's cheap. You're not going to absorb that. Something like magnesium threonate, magnesium glycinate. A good quality magnesium can really help to support and repair lungs as well. Now, antibiotics can deplete minerals, especially magnesium. So if you were on antibiotics for pneumonia, make sure you are taking magnesium if necessary. Okay, so going into lifestyle and other factors, I want to say actually even before we get into that, homeopathics work amazing here for lungs. So just to add something else to this, if you are having lung symptoms, I'd be recommending lobelia. Lobelia is a great support for the lungs. You can do it in a gemotherapy form, so lobelia gemotherapy, or you could do lobelia Plex from Unda, which is a homeopathic. But check again with a practitioner, but these can be great remedies to have on hand for lung health as well, especially if you have any lung conditions. So back to lifestyle and other factors. Number 1, rest, especially if a fever is present. Do not be doing anything but laying in bed and resting. I know this can be more challenging if you're a mom or something like that, but really take advantage of your body needing that rest. When we have a fever, we feel tired. It's for a reason. It's so that we actually rest. Our body can do what it needs to do. Get good quality regular sleep. Sleep at the right time each night. Don't go to bed at 2 a.m. 10:30 at night, something like that, to get good quality sleep. Work with that circadian rhythm. You also want to perform a mucus cleansing diet for at least 3 days. So you can drink raw vegetable juices and green drinks. You can do hot broths or soups, things that are going to add in like drying herbs. So clove, ginger, turmeric, things that are going to dry out and expel mucus from the body. You can wear warming socks and then alternate hot and cold treatments to the chest if tolerated. Honey also works really well as a cough syrup if you're not allergic. And then you want to get lots of safe exposure to sunlight, that vitamin D exposure. Obviously, stop smoking and avoid exposure to cigarette smoke, especially during pneumonia episode. And then you want to do immune builders and boosters. So here I'd be recommending Th1 immune support. That can look like berberine, it can look like glutathione, astragalus, perilla for the Th2 downregulation. There's a lot of options here, and I have a whole podcast talking about immune builders and regulators, so you can have a listen to that for more insight on what to take. Now, one thing I'm a huge fan of is steam inhalation therapy with essential oils like eucalyptus. If you have anywhere in your area a steam room, a eucalyptus steam room specifically, I would highly recommend you do some deep breathing in there. Now, some botanicals to consider, more herbs and things like that. Turmeric is number one. It's one of my go-to, again, for that inflammation. You can also look at comfrey root. It's called boneset, and comfrey root can heal, and it also dislodges mucus from the lungs. It expels dead tissue and can encourage new growth. You also can do other herbs that clear the lungs, which is like cayenne, chickweed, ginger, marshmallow, and mullein. I am a huge fan of mullein leaf. You can do these in tea form, in capsule form, so whatever you like. Now, pleurisy root relieves lung congestion. Immortal root is a bronchodilator and it can stimulate drainage. And then you have silicate in horsetail, which strengthens and rebuilds lung tissue. And then, like I mentioned earlier, lobelia. This is a bronchodilator and it can ease and improve breathing. Lobelia and all of these remedies can be taken through gemotherapy form, through homeopathic form, through herbal capsule form, through tea form. So there's so many ways to get these in. And if you're a child, I usually say go the homeopathic route, as it's a bit less I don't want to say invasive, but a little less intense in terms of the potency. And then if you're an adult, typically you could do either. But either way, check with your doctor or practitioner. But there's so many great options to support your body through pneumonia, to prevent pneumonia, to recover post-pneumonia. And you can do so many things just by taking natural remedies, supporting your diet, supporting your immune system, getting good sleep, these kinds of things. So I hope that this was informational, educational. I know we went through it a little bit quickly. I had my notes here and I wanted to just stick to them and not branch off too far since the baby's upstairs and I can literally hear him calling me. So I thought I would just get straight to the point and go through it really quickly. But if you ever have questions, like I mentioned on this topic or any of the topics I've spoken on previously, you can message me through Instagram and reach out. And if you are ever interested in doing drainage therapy, you can either work with me one-on-one, or I have my seasonal candida and parasite cleanse, which has the immune support, the pathogen cleansing and gut support, and the drainage support all in one. So you guys can check that out. It is linked in the description of this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are listening from, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.